Good day to all. My name is Vinod Vijay Mohan. Today, I am going to give a tutorial on classification society and its concept. This tutorial is basically for fresh graduates who like to pursue a career in classification society as a surveyor. The main topics which we are going to cover here is the regulatory regime and its development, the link between class rules and statutory regulations, and classification process and its framework. The first one is the regulatory regime and its development. The shipping industry developed self-regulating regime. The self-regulating regimes, which are class rules and industry standards like ISO, DIN, etc. The other type of regime is the statutory and mandatory regime. This was developed by flag state. This regime we can classify as international and national regulations. Now, going into detail into self-regulating regime, the class rules, in early 18th century, the shipping industry assigned different class to the vessels after subjecting it to survey. So basically in 1760, the ships were assigned different class. In 1834, the rules of classification of ships was developed by Lloyd's Register. The Lloyd's Register is a British classification society. This is one of the oldest classification society. They developed the rules of classification of ships. But in later 1867, the ship construction rules was developed by Germanischer Lloyd. That is a German classification society. And this marked the landmark in ship classification. And since then, the class rule are in constant state of evolution. The classification rules, as by the development of classification rule, the classifications, lots of classification society also started emerging. So this made different rules by different classification society. So there was there was a requirement among the society or the industry, shipping industry, that there must be some harmonization or unified requirement among the class society, because different class society with different rules will not work the shipping industry, will not work well in the shipping industry. So International Association of Classification Society was formed, and they started developing unified requirement to be implemented by all its member states. In 2003, IAX launched two projects on development of common structural rule, which is CSR, one for tanker and one for bulk carrier, which came into force in 1st April 2006. On the statutory regime, the development of international regulations paved way from 1876. In 1876, in the early 19th century, the Merchant Shipping Act UK was introduced. This is basically because there were lots of ship accidents due to overloading. So Merchant Shipping Act was uh, mandating plimsoll mark for the vessel to prevent overloading of the ships as a consequence of loss of British ships. However, the minimum freeboard was not defined then. In 1890, freeboard table was introduced to define positions of freeboard, plimsoll mark. In 1907 and 1908, Germany and UK initiated negotiation to harmonization of freeboard regulation. In 1913, around 40 nations under the Titanic Conference after the Titanic accident initiated development of regulations on SOLAS requirements on construction, life-saving appliances, radio communication, and nautical equipments. Even though the SOLAS Convention was adopted in 1914, it was ratified in 1929 after slight modification due to outbreak of World War One. This, in the first half of 20th century, the oil pollution was recognized as a major problem in shipping industry, affecting natural environment. In 1954, the first international agreement to address oil pollution from ship, aiming to prevent the discharge of oil into sea, was convened, Oil Pole. The Torrey Canyon oil spill, occurring in March 1967, was a significant environment disaster involving Liberian flagged supertanker SS Torrey Canyon. The Marpol Convention was adopted in November 2nd, 1973 at International Maritime Organization. It was subsequently amended in 1978 with Marpol Protocol in response to tanker accidents and entered into force on October 2nd, 1983. In the beginning of the 20th century, the first bilateral and multilateral attempts on harmonization of ship safety initiated. Due to Titanic disaster, the first international conference on safety of life at sea was convened in November 2013. In 1929, Second International Convention of Solars concluded and came into force in 1933. In 1948, an international conference in Geneva adopted a convention formally establishing IMO. The original name of IMO was then IMCO, which is Intergovernmental Maritime Consultative Organization, but name was changed in 1982 to IMO. The IMO convention entered into force in 1958 and new organization met with the first time for the following year. The IMO structure as such, if you see the structure of IMO, IMO assembly is on the top, below is the council, and below the council there are five committee, that is Maritime Safety Committee, Maritime Environmental Protection Committee, Legal Committee, Technical Cooperation Committee, Facilitation Committee. Below Maritime Safety Committee and Marine Environmental Protection Committee, there are 7 subcommittees. The major IMO conventions, as you all know, the Lowline Convention, SOLAS Convention, Marpol Convention, Tonnage Convention, Anti-Fouling System Convention, AFS Convention. Now we will see the rules and regulations and implementation. We must understand this thing very important. Understanding this thing is very important. First, we will see class rules, how these rules, regulations, interpretation, implementation is carried out. And on the other hand, we will see the statutory regulation, how these developed, implemented, interpreted. The main 3 features to be understood is the development, interpretation, and implementation. So class rule, who developed the class rule? Who interpret the class rule? Who implement the class rule? So class rules are basically developed and implemented by the classification society. It is interpreted by the classification society. The standards of which are agreed with IACs and implemented through the individual classification society rules. On the other hand, statutory regulation, it is developed by IMO, implemented by the IMO through the member states, interpreted by the member states having ratified the instrument in question or by IMO. So the statutory regulation, there are 2 parts: international regulation, which is developed, implemented, and interpreted by IMO, are the international regulation. On the other hand, about the national regulation, these are developed, implemented, and interpreted by the respective flag state, because national regulations are only applicable to the nation and its coastal waters. So this is completely upon the flag state to interpret, implement, and develop. The class rules and statute regulations and their link. We must understand, if we see the link between the class rules and statutory regulations. The adoption of national and international regulation is a significant criteria for the class rules. All the classification rules incorporates the national and international requirements into it. So, for example, the SOLAS, Chapter 2, Part 1, Section Regulation 3, where the safe access of tanker boats are concerned. These are already incorporated in the classification rule. Also, the statutory requirements also are considered while design criteria in the design criteria in the classification rules. So example, the strength of bulkheads due to flooding scenarios, everything are already incorporated in the classification. So the classification rules are basically developed keeping in view of the international and national regulations, all requirements. The role of classification in international convention. International convention or international instruments or guidelines that the vessel must follow classification rules. As a statutory requirement, classification is required under SOLAS, Chapter 2.1, Regulation 3.1. The structural, mechanical, and electrical requirement for ships to be according to the classification rules. It has mandated like that. So the role of classification in international convention is very clear on that. The classification society as such, they act as a consultant for flag state. They also, they in supporting flag state concerning interpretation of international instrument, they carry out research work for the development of new regulation upon request by flag state. Also, you must understand that IAX provides technical input and advice to IMO. The classification society act as a recognized organization. This is the major role of classification society. They act as a recognized organization. The flag state or administration are responsible for ensuring compliance with the international conventions and codes for the fleets running under their respective flag. But these administration or flag state mostly do not have worldwide coverage, and hence they delegate surveys and issuance of applicable certificates to classification societies identified as recognized organization by them. The authorization regarding the recognized organization is governed by the flag state. Actually, the flag state is responsible for surveys and certification ships under them. So flag state may authorize an organization to act on their behalf as provided in the individual legal instrument, like SOLAS Chapter 1, Regulation 6 has mandated that the flag state can authorize an organization to carry out surveys on their behalf. The classification process and its framework. This We must understand the classification process very clearly and the framework they follow in the whole classification process. The classification process, the role of classification in ship certification. The classification society approves the design of a ship for the compliance with its rules, certifies the material and components of construction, surveys the ships during construction, witness the testing, and issues upon delivery of ship class certificates stating compliance with its rule. If the flag authorizes them to carry out statutory surveys, RO issues applicable statutory certificates stating compliance with the relevant provisions of applicable international convention after satisfactory survey on board the vessel. The rules as such, rules of the classification during the construction of a ship must be in compliance with international convention and regulation, class rules, and relevant national regulation and standards like ISO, BSI, DIN, etc. In the new building construction of ship, the order, you must understand, in the new building construction of vessel, there is two client customer relationship existing there. Initially during the order for classification, is directed initially by shipyard to the classification society. So the customer client relationship is between the class and the shipyard. But after the delivery of the vessel, this relationship automatically changes from class society to ship owner because the shipyard is replaced by ship owner. So during the phase of new building construction, the plan appraisal of all relevant drawings for the compliance with the applicable class rules and statutory regulations are carried out by appointed classification society. Upon completion of new build and at the time of delivery of the vessel, all applicable and requisite certificates shall be issued to the ship after satisfactory completion of relevant surveys. While in the in the case for fleet and service, the certification process is little bit different. There will be no extensive survey carried out according to new building, but during the service of life of ship, the ship is subjected to inspection at mandated intervals by the appointed classification society to ensure continued compliance with both class and statutory requirements. These mandated intervals, will be same for class and statutory service according to harmonious survey. Uh, these are annual, which is carried out every year, intermediate, which may be second or third anniversary survey, and the special or renewal survey every 5 years. The scope of the class, scope of the survey depends upon the class rules and statutory regulations. So this is a short overview of classification society or classification process or link between class rules and statutory regulations. I hope this tutorial was helpful for your future in the career as a class surveyor. Thank you for watching my tutorial and all the best for your future as a surveyor. Thanks.